Now we also coded these studies that have the 51 effects in terms of quite a few different features. We coded the age of the learners, the subject that was being taught. We coded the practices they used for online learning. We had 15 different practices that we coded. We also coded elements of the study design and the quality of the study design. We use those things in what's called a moderator variable analysis, which is really the same as seeing, does it make any difference? The size of the online learning advantage, does it vary with these other things? So it's like an interaction and analysis of variance. And what we found is only 2 of them came out as statistically significant, although we were limited in our ability to do this because so many research studies did not provide a full description of what the online learning had been like. And so there were many studies we couldn't code, and therefore we didn't have enough power to explore things as much as we would like. So this really should be repeated, this whole process, in maybe 3 years' time. But what we found was the online learning advantage was larger in those studies where the online students spent more time learning than the students did in the classroom. Now that makes perfect sense. You spend more time learning, you get better learning outcomes. And that's really one of the huge advantages for online learning. We can extend the learning time. We could really make it 24/7 as long as our students don't care about sleeping. So that's a huge advantage, and when that's captured, it makes a difference. Oops, sorry. And then we also coded those studies. We had researchers go through and code them. Was the instructional design and the instructional content the same in the online and face-to-face conditions? And when it was not the same, there was a bigger advantage for the online learning. So the important point I try to stress, and journalists don't always get this, the study does not show that online is better as a medium. If you just put your PowerPoint slides on the web, it will not produce better learning. What it shows is that when people have redesigned their courses, they've changed them to take advantage of the affordances of online learning, then on average, students actually have higher learning outcomes. So it's not the fact that it's online per se, it's what the online enables that makes the difference. We also looked at, qualitatively, there were studies that compared different online learning practices to each other, so there were quite a few of those as well. And we found that although this was a qualitative synthesis, not a quantitative synthesis like the other results I showed you, there were some things that seemed to make a difference. The most important one seemed to be the inclusion of some kind of prompts for learner self-reflection, for the student to assess the state of his or her own learning and understanding during the course of the online instruction. And giving learners some control so they could go back and repeat or review things they wanted to, had some chance to choose what they were looking at. Most of the studies with those features showed an advantage for those features over online learning without them. There were some other common practices that many online learning course developers do kind of automatically that did not, that had very mixed effects in the published research. One of those is relating, having additional media that's not related to the content, so just adding video as well as text. Another one is just quizzes, just interspersing quizzes throughout the instruction by itself had very mixed effects. With respect to those different instructional approaches I talked about, we really couldn't draw any conclusions. Many of the studies were very hard to categorize. There was not a large number of studies, and of course many online learning offerings combine the different instructional approaches. So it was not done in a way that you could really separate and say this is the effect you get from active instruction and this is the effect you get from interactive instruction. So why is there that advantage for blended learning? I think I've already suggested some of that in what I've presented. More learning time, So if you just put your course online, it's likely not to be an increase of the learning time people have. But if you do the blended instruction, where part is in the classroom and part is online, in many of these implementations, you are in fact extending the time students spend learning. More interactivity, so you get more active interaction between the person and the content, and more interactivity you get between people within the classroom or online, so you can kind of get the best of both worlds. And then finally, and this leads into the final part of my talk, is selective reteaching of difficult concepts and skills. So those of you who came to my workshop on Thursday probably expected me to talk about formative assessment, and you were correct. So this is assessment of learning. In order to improve learning, it happens during the course of instruction and is contrasted with summative assessment that occurs at the end in order to give a grade. And my conjecture is that one of the most powerful things we can do to increase the effectiveness of online learning, besides increasing learning time, is good use of formative assessment techniques. So one of the things we can look at is how online learning provides us with new opportunities for embedding experiences in the learning that enables us and the student to get information about the student's state of understanding and state of competence as the learning is going on. Because this occurs online, a lot of this capture of information can actually be automated, and it can be fairly invisible or visible to the student. You really have new options. You can do both. And it can be done in ways that feel fairly natural rather than forced. So rather than feeling like, okay, we've been learning, now we're going to test, we can really capture information about the state of the student's understanding in the course of their interaction with materials.